Ichimon Japan is made possible by Patreon support. If you would like to make sure that we can keep bringing you more content like this, then head on over to japankyo.com/Patreon and sign up for as little as $1 a month. Yeah, that could be it. They figured, paws regrows.
Because, of course, everyone knows Japanese bear paws regrow.
Yeah, they're like lizard tails. Yep.
And you have to eat the paw quickly or the paw will grow a new bear. They're like starfish.
Welcome to Ichimon Japan. I'm Tony and
I'm Ryan.
So Ichimon is one question, and we ask extremely riveting questions about all the hottest topics going on in the Japan world on every episode.
Yeah, the most asked questions every time. Like everyone, even if you don't know anything about Japan, you probably wonder these questions at least 10 times per day.
So this is something, that I've been asked so many times, and I thought, fine, I guess I'll answer it. And so today's question is, are rabbits counted as birds because eating meat was taboo in Japan?
Yeah, I mean, we said, everyone always struggles with this question.
Yeah. All right. So basically, this is two topics that are related, but this episode, let's see, we're going to start by talking about meat culture in Japan, like bans and taboo and that kind of stuff. And then in the second half of the episode, we're going to talk about how you count rabbits in Japan.
So we're not even going to explain the rabbit thing until halfway?
No, we're not. We're not going to touch on the rabbit thing until the second half. All right?
Well, of course, it's such a popular question. They already know why people would wonder this.
Yeah, everybody knows that rabbits are birds in Japan, all right? Everybody knows this. And I think we don't have to explain it, but we are going to get into why they are birds in Japan, okay? So, but first let's talk about meat. So, do Japanese people eat meat, Ryan?
I'm pretty sure yes.
Yes. Yeah, they do eat a fair amount of meat. I mean, generally speaking, there's always, exceptions, and everybody has different diets. But
there are vegetarians here, but I think the rate might be lower than in America, to be honest.
That's definitely the impression I get. It's generally, although I think it's been getting easier, generally harder to find vegetarian options in Japan than it is in many places in the US.
I'm not a vegetarian, but I've been told by vegetarians that things in Japan that say vegetarian often are not.
Yes. A lot of times
they don't care if the oil or something was based
on oil or the broth or like the dashi, whatever. And sometimes they may not even know, like it's not something that they think about. But I've heard that due to more travel from foreigners and whatnot, that there's more of an awareness. But again, I still think it's generally lower than in the West. But anyway, there is a lot of meat dishes. Of course, there's plenty of hamburgers and steak. You can find that without any problem. You can find Korean style
Kobe
barbecue,
beef, which is like really famous.
Yakiniku, Kobe beef, exactly. Wagyu, Japanese beef, plenty. Yakitori. We did a whole episode on yakitori. Go listen to that one. And that's actually kind of related to what we're going to be talking about today as well.
And just to be accurate, all of the seafood too is also meat, despite what people seem to say.
Yeah. So we were briefly talking about this, but it's like, what is the definition of meat, right? Like, is it just animal flesh? If
yes, but apparently many cultures like to say no.
Yeah, they say like, no, fish isn't animal flesh. Then what is it? What the heck is fish?
Yeah, okay, I guess we'll get to that when we get into the reasoning, but okay.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of confusing, but so anyway, plenty of meat is eaten in Japan, but I think that generally, I haven't looked at any statistics, but from my experiences living there, and just eating still Japanese food here, portions of meat particularly do seem to be a bit smaller than your average portion in the US. There does seem to be more of an emphasis on balanced diets with, vegetables and rice and a little bit more, variety with fish as well, which is not a meat apparently, right? And
yes, it is a meat.
So generally speaking, I do think that if you were to average everything out, Japanese people do eat less meat, but there are plenty of Japanese people that eat tons of meat. So,
Yeah, I actually have an interesting story about that I'll mention at some point.
Okay. So, but anyway, the reason why we're talking about meat is that there's a long culture of like meat being taboo in some way in Japan. Like 1200, 1300 years roughly. There have been various sort of declarations that people should not eat meat or kill animals.
I feel like taboo
Uh,
should be in air quotes because
yeah, we're gonna get into
meat
it.
eating did
Yeah,
not end during that time.
yeah, they call them meat bans and taboo, but there was plenty of meat eating going on regardless of these things. But let's go back in history a bit to ancient times. So
So
basically,
first there was
like
dinosaurs.
first there was dinosaurs, and they only ate fish. So no, but basically, like before writing. So before the first written record is the Kojiki, so the 712, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So we're going back into, I guess you could say, prehistory, like Jomon and earlier periods. So yes, there was meat eating going on. There was hunting gathering going on. People were eating meat. Now, we get into around the middle of the 6th century, and that's when Buddhism is introduced. And so that is when things kind of start to shift. But in some of the records, like the Kojiki, again, the oldest written record, the Nihon Shoki, the second oldest record, the Manyoshu, which is a really famous collection of like poems, songs, that's also from the 700s. They all have mentions of meat eating. For example, one mentions an emperor that would like to hunt. And there's also mentions of eating like deer, venison, and entrails. And there's also records of pig farming. Like there was one emperor that had like 40 wild boar, and he would keep them. So
Did he
there's
eat them or
plenty
are they
of,
just his cool pets?
well, the implication was that there was eating, although the article that I found on the Kikkoman website, interestingly, it's a really detailed
Come
article.
on.
But yeah, I don't know what happened there, but they did a really detailed article by this professor, all about the history of like meat eating and taboo and all that stuff. Um, yeah, it mentions 40 pigs, but it doesn't explicitly say that they were eating it. It just kind of implies it. But anyway, so there was meat eating going on, it seems, both at the top level, the emperor, and probably commoners just hunting and doing, capturing animals and eating them. But like I said, when the Buddhism starts to show up, things start to change a little bit. And that is in part because, well, there is, I'm not sure which branch of Buddhism ended up being, the first one to get there and the most influential. But generally speaking, there's the idea of reincarnation. And so there are various realms of existence. And when you die, you may be reincarnated as an animal. And so there's, one idea is that you may end up eating an ancestor if you eat, an animal. So that's not good. You want to respect your ancestors. And so various ideas of, respecting life and, reincarnation, all these things kind of start to become, more important. And so there starts to be a taboo against to eating meat.
This is where I want to bring up one thing with the weird
Mhm.
fish being in a special category. So can you not reincarnate as a fish?
That is a very good question.
Or do
And
they
I
just
saw
not
no
care?
mention of that. Yeah, I saw no mention of that. And I don't remember any stories of fish reincarnation. Um, because there are plenty of stories of, for example, somebody being reincarnated as a dog or somebody being reincarnated as some other animal. But I don't remember hearing stories of people being reincarnated as fish. So they are karmaless, reincarnationless beings. Anyway, so yeah, so this taboo kind of gets introduced by Buddhism, but that doesn't mean that eating meat goes away. In fact, like through the Heian period, there is plenty of beef consumption, it seems. Also, especially like wild game consumption. So there's plenty of mentions of eating, for example, wild fowl, right? People would go into the forest, I guess, and somehow capture birds with nets or whatever, and eat them. Now there is one. Well, before I get to that mention, I should kind of go back just a little bit back to 675, and this is after it seems Buddhism starts to take root. But this is the first sort of meat ban, I guess you could say. So, Ryan, could you read the in 675 part?
Okay. In April of the year 675 AD, the Emperor Tenmu prohibited the killing and eating of meat throughout Japan. This ban prohibited the eating of beef, horse, dog, monkey, and chicken during the busy farming periods between April and September. The ban included the farm animals that lived together with the people, as well as monkeys, which were considered very close to humans. It did not, however, prohibit the eating of wild birds and animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then that part that again, this is from that Kikkoman article that I found, but I will include the link in the show notes.
Just for clarity, this is the same Kikkoman that makes like soy sauce, right?
Yes. Sorry for anyone that's unaware. Yes, but it was written by like an actual, a guy with a PhD, like a genuine researcher. It wasn't just some like soy sauce maker.
I hope there's actually like a scientific journal about like food science that's called like the Kikkoman Journal or something.
maybe. So anyway, so that article continues to say that like succeeding emperors continued to kind of push this, and it became like a year-round thing, which really these succeeding efforts to enforce this really imply that it wasn't 100% effective. People were still eating meat, right? Another interesting thing actually is actually I just forgot what I was going to say. So Ryan, do you have anything else to add here while I try to remember what I was going to say?
I'll just point out then it seems very much to be the case of wealthy, powerful people saying don't do X, and then they totally continue to do X themselves.
Yeah.
Which you see in all societies, all across history, including now.
Yes. I absolutely. And well, let's just keep going from here then. Yeah. Basically, this whole history is that.
It's exactly that.
Yeah. All right. So we have that first initial ban. Oh, and what I was going to say is that at no mention do I see like, yes, these are called bans at some point or like some sort of decree, but I never saw any mention of like, oh, if you eat a monkey, you're going to get thrown in jail. Right. And I did look at 2 or 3 or 4 different sources, like 1 or 2 in Japanese and 1 or 2 in English specifically. So I didn't see anything like that where there was some like really concrete punishment. There were punishments in a way, and we will get to that. But yeah, fast, exactly. And we'll get to that after we get through that little heian thing that I was mentioning. But so beef consumption does continue, and people were maybe eating like animals kind of secretly.
Kind of secretly.
It was like everybody knows, but people aren't talking about it maybe.
I feel like if they saw you like cutting up a cow, like, what's that? He's like, it's a big fish, black and white fish. And then they'd be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Can I have some?
Like, yes, it's very good, this fish. Well, I saw one mention in one article that deer were called at one point mountain whales.
I remember that, yeah.
Yamakujira, yeah. I didn't verify that in another source, but certainly was interesting. I'd never heard that term, yamakujira. Anyway, so Heian period, the people, especially like the elite, I guess, they are eating dairy and beef. And then we get to this one example in this article where it does mention rabbits too, which is going to come in the second half of the episode. We're going to be talking about rabbits. But could you read that part, Ryan?
Sure. A poem from Heian period describes the dinner table of a very beautiful woman as being made of gold with silver platters of cold quail soup, hot duck soup, salted wild goose, bear paws, rabbit spleens, and chicken heads.
All right. So one right here. Yeah, they're eating rabbits. Okay, although rabbit spleens, right? I don't know.
This means the bear paw donut, right?
Yeah, like bear paw, man. Like why? Come on, like a bear steak, I get, but why the bear paw? That's so peculiar. I've never heard of eating bear paw.
I like how the quail soup has to be cold, but the duck soup is hot.
It's probably like a Chinese thing because there's like the whole hot foods and cold foods in Chinese culture. And then
just salted wild goose. They didn't do anything weird with that one.
Yeah, just keep it nice and simple. So one more thing I do want to point out here is it's very interesting how we're getting rabbits clumped in with these wild fowl, okay?
And bears.
And bear paw for some reason. Okay, so we got a bunch of like wild birds, rabbit spleen, and a bear paw.
Here's my theory. Like, killing the bear would have been taboo, so they just cut off its paws.
Oh man. Yeah, that could be it. They figured, paws regrows.
Because, of course, everyone knows Japanese bear paws regrow.
Yeah, they're like lizard tails.
And you have to eat the paw quickly, or the paw will grow a new bear. They're like starfish.
Yes. So anyway, yeah, the reason why, two reasons. Obviously, the mention of rabbit. Please remember that. And the other thing is, this obviously seems to be some kind of well-to-do woman, some aristocrat woman, I guess, because it seems like it would be a rather fancy meal. So they're eating meat. Maybe there's no beef here, but there's bear and rabbits and birds, so they are eating meat. And this is all around like the Heian period. So anyway, so all this meat consumption does go on, but there, like I said, there are penalties of some kind. But again, they seem to be rather loose. It's almost like you should do this, but then who's monitoring? I don't know. Ryan, could you like describe some of these penalties?
Sure. Basically, people would be required to do so many days of fasting.
Yeah.
Depending on what animal they ate.
Yeah.
So, for example, if it was the meat of a domestic or wild animal, it would be 100 days. And you'd have to fast for 21 days if you ate with someone else who ate meat.
Yes.
So I guess if you had like a salad, but the person next to you had a sandwich with meat, then 21 days. And 7 days fasting for anyone who ate with someone else who consumed meat. So as you can see, this can clearly spread throughout all of Japan in like a day or two.
Yeah, it's contact tracing, man. Yeah, so again, but like who was enforcing this, and like what exactly does a fast consist of? I guess like no meat and you just eat some rice and water or something? Like I
the
don't
normal
know.
diet anyway.
Yeah, like this wasn't particularly clear and I couldn't really find too many more details on it. So it seems like it was like maybe the temples, the priests, maybe a little bit of Shinto too, because the whole idea of eating meat also kind of ended up touching on like some Shinto ideas of like kegare, like becoming dirty, right? Like killing animals and eating that sort of blood and meat and flesh and whatever is a dirty thing. You know, you become tainted or whatever. So this all kind of like converged, and so these ideas of like eating meat just became like a kind of frowned upon thing. But again, like I don't know, like were people actually like enforcing this in some way? Like I don't know, but yeah, so that was a thing. And apparently after the Heian period, it got a little bit more stricter. Some of these like fastings and whatever like penalties did seem to get a little bit longer, but regardless, people were still eating meat. And then we get into the 1500s and the Portuguese show up. And the Portuguese, like Xavier, like the missionary, or Xavier, as they call him in Japanese. I don't know if...
Right? Is he not Javier? I thought it was Javier.
Well, in Japanese, they call him Xavier. I don't know how you would... Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the pronunciation of 1500s era Portuguese, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But it's written like Professor X, like Xavier.
Professor X English, arrived looking for mutants.
Yeah, Professor X floated in on his wheelchair, and and he brought beef with him. No, actually, so according to the Kikkoman article, the Portuguese missionaries were advised that Japanese frowned upon the idea of eating meat, and they even thought of drinking milk as consuming the blood of the cow, which...
They did not have a good understanding of biology.
Yeah, they did. If you yank on the teat, it starts bleeding.
Which is weird because, like, as we mentioned earlier, like the emperor and like lords had dairy. Yeah. So
yeah, well, I guess, you know, they didn't have the internet, so I don't know. The people would just say things and it would just spread, and then nobody, I don't know. Anyway, but this just reminded me of the Nosebleed episode, because there was a mention of like how there was a mistaken idea of like cow's blood being milk chocolate containing cow's blood because of a linguistic like little mistake. Please go listen to the Nosebleed. Does what is it? I think does seeing sexy things give you anime style nosebleeds? I will include a link in the show notes.
So basically,
So
it
anyway,
wasn't a mistake. They just flat out believed milk was blood.
apparently, some people did, according to what the Portuguese were told, and I'm not sure who told this to the
How
Portuguese.
did they react when they saw people who just flat out drank or like ate blood? Because that also exists in the West.
Oh dear, what are you doing? But they were eating dairy, like you said, milk and dairy. They're yeah, I don't know, but anyway,
it's all behind closed doors, so they had to pretend shocked in public. But
well, yeah, dairy and beef does seem to have been a little bit more like restricted to the aristocracy and the kind of imperial court, and it was just harder to get, but they enjoyed it anyway. So maybe that's why some of the commoners had no idea about it. But
real quick, I want to throw out, just because it's a cool little trivia thing. Right here is actually where tempura came to Japan, because despite being associated with Japan, it's not Japanese.
Yeah. It's based on a Portuguese style of frying, I guess, fish and probably vegetables as well. But yeah, the original seed on which the basic dish is based on came from Portugal. So yay. But yeah, so the Portuguese, apparently they try to respect this at the beginning. They're trying not to eat meat and whatnot, but
and then they realized
eventually
the Japanese also didn't respect it.
Yeah, maybe there's that. And then also I think the article mentions something like, well, the Japanese diet didn't like agree with them. I don't know what didn't agree with them, but anyway, there's like even one mention of this huge feast where they kill a cow and they bring in like all the villagers and they all eat like this huge feast of beef and whatever, and it was a big deal. For like Easter, it was a big Easter feast. Yeah. It was a big Easter feast. So there was plenty of meat eating going on, it seems. But of course, eventually and then Toyotomi Hideyoshi is like, oh my God, how can you eat meat and beef? And apparently, according to one record, but again, there were Japanese people doing this, so I don't know what the big deal was.
Again, you're just in public. You have to pretend like it's a big deal.
Yeah. It definitely seems like there was plenty of that going on. But anyway, eventually the Portuguese, right, they get kicked out, the missionaries and all the Christians, they're persecuted, blah, blah, blah. But according to the Kikkoman article, it seems like that influence of eating beef particularly really like led to a bit of a resurgence in the popularity. And
I hate to interrupt you, just like blah, blah, blah over a genocide.
Well, that's a different episode. That's a whole different episode. We can't get into that. We're talking about meat eating for like 30 minutes just to talk about one little rabbit thing
you're right.
here.
It just feels weird to blah, blah, blah over that.
Not my intention, but again, we have to kind of stay on track here. Anyway, the Edo period comes around and the Tokugawas implement this kind of Buddhist culture. And I think it's in 1675. Is that correct?
I have 1687 for the ban being restored.
Okay. So they implement this Buddhist culture, and then in 1687, the Tokugawa, I believe it was the fifth shogunate, he implements another meat ban. All right, he bans meat again. He says no more meat, no more killing of animals, but it keeps on going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I don't know. Like he says this, but was there any like police going around there, like saying like, hey, what are you eating there? You let me taste that. Like,
I hope there was, and they treat it like when a dog like has something in its mouth, like, what's in your mouth? Let me see
it. Get it out. Let go. Open your mouth. Spit it out. And then they like taste it like how they taste cocaine in some of those old action movies.
And then they have to fast for 100 days, and their partner has to fast for 15 days, and their partner's partner has to fast for 7 days.
Yep. So, but what happens in the Edo period is really interesting because despite this ban, you have like hunters, like they're going out for wild game and then bringing it back to like Edo to sell in these like wild game shops. So you'll have like tanuki, like raccoon dogs, and probably deer and otters. Apparently otters were also a thing.
No, that is unforgivable. If you guys don't know, Japanese otters are like the cutest animals in the world.
Yes, they are super cute. Yes.
So I also want to point out, I'm happy to hear this history because it's exactly the same with modern Japan and how gambling is illegal, but it's totally not.
Yeah. It's like everybody knows it's there, but then
gambling's illegal. That's why we have casinos on every corner.
Yeah. So people were just, loving it. People were eating that wild game, and birds and whatnot, and probably rabbits as well. But like there were cookbooks, there were like mentions in cookbooks of eating meat and preparing, like you grill the tanuki this way or whatever. And yet there was still this kind of like tension between, you know, eating meat being taboo, but people still eating meat. Like there were very specific, supposedly very specific ways in which people had to cook meat. Like commoners would have to go outside their house, use different cookware. They couldn't look at their Buddhist or Shinto altars while they were cooking the meat. So
Which, to be fair, like, why would you be looking at your altar while cooking anyway?
yeah, like I didn't get that because like you wouldn't have it outside. Usually that would be inside the house.
Yeah, it
so why
seems
would
like
you be
an
looking
unnecessary rule.
just in case for the guy that has it outside, I guess. But so there are these ideas, but to what extent people were actually doing it, who knows? Who knows? There's one mention like towards the end of the Edo period that when feudal lords would walk by this area of Edo that was known for its wild game meat shops, butcher shops, they would remark how disgusting it was. And yet people were eating meat. Like commoners were eating like this kind of like dried beef jerky-ish, like kind of thinly sliced beef jerky-ish sort of thing. The some of the shogun were consuming beef. There's this one story of the Hikone clan would transport beef to the shogun because he loved it. It was in Japanese, I saw it was pickled in sake, but no, in English, I saw the beef was pickled in sake, and then in Japanese, it was miso zuke, which miso is fermented, right, like soybeans. So I'm not sure. Maybe there's a mistranslation there or something. But anyway, the beef was preserved in some way and then transported to the shogun because he enjoyed it. So there's one thing that we should mention, though, that I think the taboo of killing animals and dealing with the flesh was stronger than simply consuming it.
It seems that way, yeah.
Yeah, because, and we can't get too much into this because this is a far deeper topic that has even influence into present day, but there were many times people that would butcher animals, or for example people that would make leather, right, like tan hides and that kind of things. They were basically treated as people like on the outside of society, right? They were severely discriminated against, and so there's definitely like strong ties with that aspect of Edo society and into today. We can't get into that because that, like I said, that is a very deep topic that I think should be treated with care, and we can't get into too much, but it should stand to be mentioned that there was a very strong taboo there. But once it got into the consumption of the meat, it seems like it wasn't such a big deal.
Double standards.
Yes, plenty. So pork was also consumed. There's a record that mentions how delicious the pork was. There's records showing pig farming going on, like in Hiroshima, for example. So pig, wild birds, otters, beef were being eaten somewhat on the down low, but also not. So yeah, there was plenty of meat eating going on. But basically, the Kikkoman article even says this pretty explicitly. It seems like some people, sure, they were very careful about it, but for the most part, it seems like it was either like something that you ate on a somewhat special occasion, or people would use the excuse of meat being a medicinal kind of thing, right? So there's this one story that the article mentions of the Shinsengumi. So the Shinsengumi is a very famous group of samurai that they were protecting the emperor in the waning days of the Edo period. And the story goes that many members of the Shinsengumi were exhibiting like poor health. And so a doctor gets sent, he examines them, and he says, "You guys are suffering from malnutrition. Go kill a pig, eat it." And they eat the pig and they all get better. And I guess they develop a taste for pork. So yeah.
I gotta say, like, I am happy we live in, like, with modern doctors with medicine that actually helps you. But how cool would it be if you went to the doctor and it's like, you need to eat yakiniku today?
Yeah, go get some pork chops, a couple pig buns, and maybe some
bear
fried
paws.
chicken. Yeah, some bear paws. And then call me in the morning. Yeah. So I guess, to some extent, eating some meat, like for example, even today, like if you're suffering from anemia, you're suffering from iron deficiency, right? So some doctors might say you need to eat a bit more red meat, to put that in. So there is some science there, I guess, but I think also
You heard it here. If you're feeling bad, go eat beef. Tony's medical advice.
Yeah, but no, yeah, I think there was also just some like, you feel bad, go eat some meat. Like, there's kind of some of that going on. But anyway,
also, it's your birthday, go eat some meat. It's a sunny day, go eat some meat.
But don't look at the Buddhist altar, because it could be grandpa. So anyway, we get to the Meiji period, and that's when Westernization happens and all that stuff, and they really try to model their society. Japan tries to kind of mimic the West in many, many, many aspects, including eating meat. So we're in the Meiji period, and then in 1872, there's this notable case of these Buddhist monks or priests. They try to break into the imperial palace to confront the emperor about the government's promotion of eating meat, and the emperor had eaten meat in the previous New Year's to kind of push this idea of eating meat, because one of the things that was said, that part of the reasons why Japanese were smaller and thinner than Westerners was because they were not eating as much meat, and so they needed to eat meat to grow big and strong. And so the government latches onto that, and the emperor eats meat to promote it, and then eventually eating beef and meat becomes all the rage. But you do have this case of these monks and probably other people that were kind of rebelling against it. And I think in this case, even like a few of the priests ended up getting killed because of, they're trying to break into the palace and confront the emperor. And interesting little side note, the Japanese, I guess, media, or in Japan, it tried to be covered up, but one foreign reporter reported it, and it got reported in in England, I think. And so that's part of the reason why we have some record of this. Yeah.
I also got to point out the whole like eating meat is bad, but violent revolt because of eating meat, that's okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it's like don't make us eat beef or we'll kill you. There's, like I said,
killing a cow unacceptable. Killing humans because they killed a cow. Go for it.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I said, it's really tough to piece all this apart in a sense, because there's a lot of contradictions and double standards.
Yeah, it's all based on
going on.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a lot of times what you'll see mentioned is that Japan had a 1,200-year ban on meat. Not.
It was very on and off and not very enforced.
Yeah. At best, it was on paper. But yeah, not really enforced in a strict sense.
I mean, considering during Edo it was re-established, there was definitely some time where it was not an official law, yet they still try to act like it was. Yeah, that
seems to be, exactly, that seems to be the implication.
You don't normally pass a law that is a law that already exists.
Yeah, exactly. So we understand the complicated history of meat eating in Japan now, at least the broad strokes. There is plenty more, so I will include links in the show notes if you want to get into it. But yeah, Ryan.
We're about to move to the rabbit?
We're about to go into a commercial, but if you want to mention it quickly.
Before we leave the beef eating thing, just to talk about modern Japan. So as we mentioned, meat eating, very, very common. I've met many Western vegetarians that live in Japan. I've actually never met a Japanese vegetarian, but they probably exist.
Yeah, I can't think of any Japanese vegetarians that I've met.
But anyway, not important. An example of people who absolutely love meat in Japan, I had a friend who this story is probably safe to tell because he passed away from old age, so he can't get in trouble now.
Yeah.
He's from Japan. He was a doctor friend of mine that I met when I was working like an Eikaiwa school. And he wanted to visit many like cultural locations in Japan. And one of them was a Buddhist temple like on top of a mountain in Osaka. And they have a strict no meat policy there. So they warn you before you come, like if you want to come visit and stay here, you can't eat meat. But he absolutely loved meat. So he secretly like brought canned pork in with him.
Oh, man.
And cooked it secretly in his room at night with a lighter.
Whoa.
So I think they think that no one's eaten meat there for like hundreds of years.
At least one guy has. And if he did it, there's probably other people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they've had a rule for hundreds of years or however long it's been there, but yeah, he was like proudly like, oh yeah, I ate it. It was delicious. And nobody knew.
All right. So since you mentioned that, I'll mention really, really briefly my own little funny side thing about someone eating meat in Japan. But okay, the sister of a friend of mine was dating the son of a Buddhist priest that they handled, like they actually had a temple.
Mm.
And he was also going to school to follow in the footsteps of his father, so a Buddhist school of some kind. He was in university, and his well, according to just us talking, I don't know if it was actually his favorite, but he really loved yakiniku, which is Korean style barbecue. He
Because it's
loved
great.
eating meat. Yeah,
If you've
it
never
is
had it,
great.
go have yakiniku.
I mean, I love it, but it's just funny because your image of a Buddhist priest is not somebody that's going to eat and he also loved the expensive stuff. So
Was he planning
your
to
image is,
stop this when he became a full-fledged priest, or did he just not care?
I don't know, but it was just a funny image in my mind where you have this young, aspiring priest chowing down on pounds of meat.
So, because you knew a aspiring priest who ate meat, and I knew someone who snuck into a Buddhist temple to eat meat, there's a pretty high chance that the Buddhist priests themselves are secretly eating meat there too.
Yeah, I'm sure. There's also the idea that priests or monks shouldn't refuse an offering, a donation.
Mm.
So if they're given meat, they are supposed to eat it regardless. And really, this is interesting in that it goes all the way back to the story of how the Buddha supposedly died, because the popular story is that he ate spoiled pork that somebody gave him. So yeah, monks, priests, there is, although maybe it's encouraged that they shouldn't eat meat of their own volition. If they're begging and they're given meat, it's totally fine usually. So many nuances to this little thing, but now that, yeah, like I said, now that we know all the general meat stuff, we can jump into the rabbit stuff. But let's take a quick break first. Hey, Tony here. So I have a quick announcement here, and it's related to KimitoDesigns.com. That's the shop where I sell t-shirts and whatnot with designs inspired by things that we talk about on this show primarily. And the new designs, there's two of them. There's two new t-shirts. Those designs are inspired by this episode. So this episode is all about meat eating and eating rabbits and this peculiar quirk of the Japanese language that kind of classifies rabbits as birds, or at least it implies that rabbits have wings. We will be talking about that in the second half of the show. But both of these designs are inspired by that. One is a rabbit with wings. The rabbit is directly inspired by a piece of classic Japanese art. And I had an artist. Her name is Rama, great artist. I will include a link to her stuff too in the show notes. But anyways, yeah, I had an artist put wings on this rabbit. It turned out hilarious, and the kanji for Ichiwa is there. Again, more info in the second half of the show. And then there's another really cute design, kind of, which is a rabbit head with a fork on it on a plate. It's a little dark, but I think it's pretty fun. And it says "itadakimasu" under the image. So if you're into either of those, go check them out at kimitodesigns.com. Your purchases there will help support the show. One other thing, of course, as always, a new episode of Japan Station is out for you to enjoy, and that one is all about the word washoku. So the word washoku means Japanese cuisine, but UNESCO kind of defines it in a very different, and I think it's safe to say problematic way. So we talk about all that stuff with Dr. Katarzyna Chifiarka, who is an expert on the history of food in modern Japan. It's a really, really interesting discussion. Go check that out at japanstationpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, don't forget about kimitodesigns.com. Go get your t-shirts. And with that, it's time to get back into the show and start talking about how you count rabbits in Japanese. All right, so we're talking about rabbits, and this will come back to the whole meat thing that we were talking about. But first, we should talk about the counting system in Japanese.
Grammar lesson. Yay!
Grammar lesson. So Japanese learners, this is particularly useful to you. And if you don't care about the Japanese language, I think this is still interesting. So please pay attention. So basically, there's two ways to count in Japanese. You have the Japanese way, hitotsu, futatsu, mitsu, and usually that's for things. One thing, hitotsu, two things would be futatsu, blah, 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 and you keep going. That's 1 to 10, and then usually the changes, but we're not going to get into that. And then you have the other way to count, which uses counters. Right?
So you're going to use... Isn't tsu the counter for hitotsu?
Yes. So,
because I think there's only one way. You just use the other number pronunciations.
Yeah, but hey, anyway, we're not going to. I don't want to complicate it too much. So, keeping it very simple, right? Usually, you would say like if you're at a restaurant, something hitotsu, something futatsu, or you're at a store, something mitsu, yotsu, itsutsu, blah blah blah. But then you have the other way, which uses the 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody that knows like how do you count in Japanese, you usually know like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right?
With lots of exceptions.
Yes, with exceptions. But you use those numbers plus a counter that can vary depending on what you are counting. It can vary. A lot of times it's like on the shape of depending on the shape of what you're counting, or whether
mostly shape/size, but yeah,
right, yeah, shape, size, whether it's alive or not, various little factors that come together. But some are specifically only for one thing, some are broader. But anyway,
so like for example, some common ones, ko, it would be small thing that can probably like fit in your hand. Any
kind of little thing, yeah.
Mai would be flat thing like paper or CDs.
Yeah. So 1 mai, 2 mai, 3 mai, 4 mai, right? So you would use that 1, 2, 3, combine it with the counter, and that's how you count tickets, or like you said, CDs maybe, or various flat things, sheets of paper. Now, when we get to animals, all right, usually, I think generally speaking, what you're going to hear is hiki, or due to a phonetic, right, due to a phonetic nuance of Japanese, sometimes it turns into piki. So, for example, ichi hiki becomes ippiki. That's how you would pronounce it. That is one animal. Ni hiki, 2 animals. But usually this is generally used to refer to smaller animals, right? So like about what size would you say, Ryan?
I would say this is like an animal that you could lift without too much difficulty.
Yeah.
So like a rabbit, though rabbits don't use it.
Yes. 1 second.
Like a cat, like most dogs. Otters, because they're adorable.
Otters, yeah. I've seen it used for insects as well.
Really? I think I have too, actually.
Yeah. So generally, like you said, something you can pick up without too much difficulty. That's going to be piki. But rabbits,
I said really like I was surprised the more I think about it. I think it's frequently used with insects.
Yeah. Rabbits have a bit of an exception, which we'll get to. Birds also have the exception to that. We will get to that. So, there is another counter for animals, which is like big animals, to, right? Which is head,
like cows, horses.
Yeah. Maybe
sumo wrestlers.
Sumo wrestlers.
Not really. Oh, people do have a counter, though. People are nin.
Yeah, nin. Yes. So we'll get back to to in just a moment, but let's first talk about rabbit, the thing that we've been alluding to this entire episode.
Yeah, so it's not only rabbit, but some things have unexpected counters, and rabbit is one of them, and one of the most famous. So rabbit, you would think would be hiki, because it's more or less the same size as a cat. They're both mammals, all the things pretty similar, but they aren't. They use the counter wa, which is primarily used with birds.
Yes, so wa is written using the kanji for wing, or it can also be interpreted as feather. And so that's why it makes sense that you would use ichi wa, ni wa with birds when you're counting birds. And it doesn't make sense to most people why you would use that to count rabbits.
For background, most Japanese people also don't know why this is.
Yes. And I think often, while they may be vaguely aware of this, usually they just say hiki or piki, right? Which is especially the generic small animal one.
It's still something that, like, since I work in a high school, children might not be aware of. So, like, if you say hiki and a teacher points out, like, oh, rabbit should be wild. Like, oh, really?
Yeah.
It's not like your common sense if you're Japanese. It's something that you're going to learn at some point and probably be surprised.
It's basically like borderline trivia. Like you do see it on quiz shows sometimes.
If you grow up on
yeah.
like a farm with rabbits, you probably know, but for everyone else, it seems
Yeah, maybe.
surprising.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But yeah, so for some reason, birds are counted as no. For some reason, rabbits are counted as birds.
No.
Birds are
It's
birds.
weird. So now we have established that Wa is the rabbit counter. So why are birds counted with Wa?
Well, again, birds make sense because why is feather or wing, whatever. But why
Yeah.
rabbits or birds? Like why? So I wanted to find out, and so I did some looking around in Japanese because I didn't see any mention of this in English, or at least any kind of lengthy mention of this. So
Until
I read a
this
couple
video
articles.
now, or podcast now.
Yeah, this is going to be the source when people look up why are rabbits birds in Japanese. Bam!
Watch
Ichimon
out,
Japan.
Kikkoman.
So anyway, Ryan, let's go through some of these theories, and why don't you explain the first one since you actually have personal experience with this?
Yeah,
one.
so as many Japanese learners probably experience when they first hear this, I wanted to know why this was. So I asked people, and this is just like random friends in Japan around me, and no like linguists or anything. And most people just say like, I don't know, that's strange, right? But some people tried to like give a theory, and their theory was that maybe historically people thought rabbits' long ears are kind of wing-like.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore they get the bird counter.
Yeah. I saw that online as well.
Yeah. It seems like a common thing for people with no research to just assume.
Yeah. And I'll make it explicit right now, but I have no concrete information that any of these theories are actually accurate. And like, there's some record by the emperor that said, hey, everybody, like rabbits are actually birds and this is why. And,
And then someone was like, but they can't fly. I was like, but neither can penguins.
Yeah. So
it was this long philosophical debate that eventually concluded with rabbits being birds.
If only we had a record like that, then I could give you the solid answer. But no,
so we have no record, but it definitely happened.
Yeah. The famous rabbit debate of 792.
Yes, we even have the year, but no record.
Yes. So there is this idea that the long ears were like wings. So maybe
also in 1792, they're probably like, "What's a penguin?"
Yes. All right. So what's another theory that sometimes comes up when you look?
So this theory we've named the similar flavor and nets theory.
So this was in an article that I found, and it cites a book that mentions how it speculates that because the flavor of rabbit meat and some bird meat was similar, then perhaps that's why. But then that same article, in a kind of criticism of that book, says that really this seems to be an allusion to the fact that the way you would capture a wild rabbit and a wild bird was similar in that you would use nets for both. Yeah, I don't know.
Have you ever had rabbit yourself, Tony?
I think once or twice, probably in Peru, and I have no memory of it.
Okay. I've never had it because I had a pet rabbit, and I have a personal rule to not eat previous pets.
Yeah.
But I've had people who have had it. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I think they said it didn't taste anything like chicken.
Yeah, I don't think it's known for its particularly strong flavor, but I don't know. Maybe...
It's just kind of funny because we actually, both of us had crocodile last year in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Which does taste like chicken, but I don't think that gets the wah. Maybe because how do you catch a crocodile? Do you use a net?
You got to wrestle it, man.
Oh, okay. Obvious. That's the only way. You just go in there shirtless and wrestle the sucker.
Yeah, wrestling gators, man. Anyway, so that's one theory. What's another one?
One is called the kanji theory.
This one's, man, I don't know. This one's quite a stretch, but so the wing kanji, which again is used for counting birds, can also be read u, right? That is called the onyomi. So, for example, down, like feathers, as in like your down blanket, is called umo in Japanese. So that uses the kanji for feather or wing, and it's pronounced u. And usagi can also be like, sometimes you just say it as u, especially when you're saying like the 12 animals of the zodiac. You would say u. So the theory is that because the u was the onyomi of wing was u, and then u is also usagi, then they started using u for wing for counting rabbits. So I don't know. It just seems convoluted to me. So yeah, this
Yeah.
is this is one of the least convincing ones for me.
I'm not a historical linguist about Japan, but I feel like this is almost certainly not true because generally these naming conventions come from the people involved, like the actual hunters,
Yeah,
who 1,000 years ago probably weren't that literate with various Chinese kanji readings.
very good point. Exactly. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, especially like I mean, I'm not sure exactly on the dates, but well into 600s, 700s, 800s, 900s, it was really only the super educated high class that could read the Chinese. Basically, it
Yeah.
was Chinese with Japanese readings slapped onto them.
And they probably weren't the same people who were going out in the fields to hunt rabbits with nets.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this seems highly, highly unlikely. But yeah. Anyway, what's another one?
The Taba Theory, or the Tawa Theory, or the Taha Theory.
Oh well, no. So it's the Taba theory or the Waha theory.
Oh, I'm
guess
sorry, I misread it. The Taba Theory or the Waha Theory. I hope it's the Waha Theory. I like that more.
So this is another one that deals with the kanji, but I think the idea was that it used to be written taba, like so the counter used to be written using the kanji for taba, and taba means like a bundle. So for example, if you have like a stack of cash, you would say like a taba.
Clearly, Tony is loaded because that's the first thing his mind goes to.
What things do you stack?
Money? Well, of course, cash.
So the idea is that the hunters would use taba because you would bundle up the ears of the rabbit after you would catch them, and I guess carry them from the ears or something like that. But then an alternate reading for the kanji was wa or ha. So then wa eventually becomes the wa of birds. But again, this is like really convoluted. Like it's too many steps for me. So
I just got an image in my head based on your money thing. Like, you know how sometimes people submit like fan arts to like YouTube channels or podcasts like this?
Yeah.
Like someday someone's going to draw like a picture that's like me in like a tiny little apartment in Japan surrounded by bears, and you in Hawaii with just stacks of money all around you. What else do you stack besides money?
Yes. Bear reference goes back to I think it was the Annoying Things About Japan Part 2 episode. So go listen to that. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Taba, I don't like that theory. So what's another one?
So this one, the name of this one, it's the second best Tony theory name, I think. What was the other one?
Tunt. Tony's Unified Nosebleed Theory, I think it was.
Yeah, you definitely have to watch the Nosebleed Theory to hear about Tunt.
Yes.
So this is the general people just want to eat meat explanation, so rabbits became birds theory.
I love that. It's funny having other people read your stuff out loud. All right. So
the general people just want to eat meat explanation, so rabbits became birds theory.
I don't know what the acronym for that one is, but
it's something very hard to pronounce.
Yeah, I didn't think about But basically, this one actually intersects a lot of times with the ears theory, or with the net theory, or with the flavor theory, or with the general, just like I said, general people just want to eat meat theory. So the idea is that people wanted an excuse to eat rabbits. And so they would come up with, for example, like, because their ears are long, and I want to eat this rabbit, therefore I'm just going to say it's bird. And generally speaking, it was more taboo to eat like four-legged animals such as beef and pork, but
that was
not
the highest
so
taboo.
Much. Yeah.
Well, I assume eating human is the highest taboo, so second highest taboo.
Yeah, human is also the most dangerous game, so let's not forget that.
Unless you catch it with a net, and then it's a bird.
But so birds were generally like, it wasn't as bad to eat a bird, right? So,
yeah, they're lower on the ranking.
So just in case we didn't make that explicit earlier, I think that's an important thing to point out. And so that's why they would want to, in theory, say that a rabbit is a bird. Another thing is because rabbits hop around and stand up on two legs, therefore it's a bird. It's not a four-legged animal, right?
It's just hopping with its wings.
Yeah, it's hopping.
Also, its ears are wings. Don't pay attention to that.
And then, like we said about the net thing, right? You catch birds with nets, you catch rabbits with nets. Oh, therefore, so it's a bird, therefore I can eat it, right? Basically, just coming up with anything that say like, oh, rabbit's a bird because I want to eat it.
I mean, for whatever reason, fish. I don't know if we explicitly mentioned this, but a lot of cultures, for some reason, come up with this idea that fish are not meat.
Right. Yeah.
They should have just like counted a rabbit, or why not just count a cow as a fish and be like, there we go.
Cow is a fish.
Yeah. We raised this one in this lake, therefore it's a fish. Now we can eat it.
Well, interesting. A quick little side note, but in the Meiji period, there were people like still rebelling against the whole eating meat and all that. And then this one, kind of like statesman of the time, I believe it was Fukuzawa Yukichi, very well-known guy, but he wrote this thing trying to convince people to eat meat. And one thing he says is like, well, we eat whales, don't we? What's the difference?
That guy knew his science. It is a mammal.
Yeah. Anyway, so generally just the idea is that, right, people wanted to eat rabbits, so they came up with any excuse possible to say that it was a bird, therefore it wasn't as taboo to eat a rabbit. Again, no concrete evidence for this, but before we get into the rest, which there is still more to discuss, what do you think, Ryan? Do you think that the meat taboo really is the reason for this rabbit thing? This is purely our opinion, but what do you think after all this stuff that we researched?
We have no actual evidence, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
However, it does seem very likely more than the other ones. Mm-hmm. The only thing I think hurting it is that despite rabbit being eaten, I don't think it was ever like a very widely eaten meat.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. I mean, there's no famous rabbit dishes that I can think of.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but I think it's similar to like the American West where people ate it, but it was never like a staple food to the extent of like beef or pork or anything like that.
Yeah. It certainly seems that way. I mean, the impression that I get is that really it was like wild game, right? So like the more rural areas, they would just catch it and it's just there, so they would eat it. But it never rose to the status of like beef or pork or, like chicken or whatever. Yeah.
And I feel like if this was an official thing, like that in their law was forgiven because of this exception, it might have become like a more popular, widespread thing than it did. I don't know. Maybe rabbit just doesn't taste very good. So even with this, it didn't really catch on.
Yeah. But apparently rabbit spleen was a thing in the Heian period. So
yeah.
Never tried rabbit spleen.
What did they do with the rest of the rabbit?
You plant it so that you get a rabbitry. Oh god, that's the seed. Rabbits grow from spleens.
Like a rabbit standing on two legs pops out of the ground and like spleens grow off his ears as fruits.
Yes, it's a tree bird. Yep, that's what it is.
That would make things even more confusing. So like Japanese rabbits are actually plants, but we classify them as birds.
Why do you do all this? We just wanted to eat rabbits, all right? They look delicious, so we just said whatever we had to, all right? All right. So, so I agree. I think that this is the most convincing theory, and humanity's desire for food and meat is unquenchable. So it's very convincing, but I will hesitate from saying yes to the question that we ask in this episode because there's no concrete evidence.
So I hate to steal your thunder, but I'm going to propose the Ryan's theory of how languages usually work. Probably some farmer people just didn't know what the counter for birds and rabbits were and just started using wa.
Yeah, it's very possible.
Again, usually these people were not very literate. Yeah.
And then maybe along the way, like the hunters or the butchers or whatever, they said, oh, you know what? This actually helps us sell the rabbits because we can sell actually they're birds. So, hey, so maybe it's like multiple factors. It's very, very.
Another possibility is today people look at it as if Japanese is a universal, but at the era the stuff was happening, Japanese was not standardized.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Maybe it was just a fluke that just happened to become part of the what's called today like Hyojungo, like the general dialect that's used in Japan, right? The standard dialect.
Yeah. So again, no evidence, but it's completely possible that like Hiki was the standard in areas where they didn't eat rabbit, but they like one region where they did eat it, didn't use Hiki at all, but used wa for everything. But because they were the only ones capturing it, that just kind of like got absorbed into the standard when it was standardized hundreds of years later.
Yeah.
No
Yeah,
idea,
no,
but
that's a great observation. Yeah.
Historically there
So
was lots of variation. There still is variation among Japanese now, but it
definitely.
was much bigger in the past.
Yes. So a couple more things about counting rabbits. One YouTube video that I found had a guy that was explaining this. Like, oh, you're supposed to say wa, but I don't like it because I love rabbits, and wa actually has this connection to eating rabbits, and so I don't like it when people eat rabbits, and so I highly recommend that people actually use hiki or usa. So they should count rabbits as ichiusa, ni usa, san usa.
Usagi Ichiusa.
Yeah. So
As someone who had a pet
video.
rabbit, I will go with this dude. They make great pets. They're like smarter and friendlier than you'd think.
Yeah, so I'm down with usa. I'm fine with usa. And then there's a famous proverb in Japanese that uses the kanji for usagi, but it reads it in a different way. So that proverb is nito o mono wa ito o mo. How about you read it?
Okay, I will warn him ahead of time. It's kind of like a tongue twister for me. Nito o monu wa ito o moezu.
Okay, so nito, that's two rabbits. It's using the counter to for rabbits, but not to, the long to. It's a short to. The long to we mentioned earlier was for big animals.
Yeah,
this
so
short to is a very obscure, like this is the only time when this reading for the kanji of usagi is used as far as this article where I found it is concerned. So nito, two rabbits, o, chase or go after.
Yeah.
Mono, person in this case. Mono refers to a person, an individual. Ito is one rabbit. Moezu doesn't even capture one. So the person that goes after two rabbits is not even able to capture one rabbit, which is basically like
that's kind of good advice.
It is like
don't do too many things at once kind of thing.
Yeah, like two. What is it? A bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, or something like that.
I say this one's better because I've heard that like all my life, and when I was a kid, I had no clue what the heck that meant. But this one is clear.
Yeah. Basically, if you try to do too much at the same time, you're going to end up with nothing. Just focus on one thing, and you'll get it done well. And so, just a really quirky thing, right? Like it seems like to is being used as a counter, but actually, it's being used as this alternate reading for the kanji. And the explanation is that with a proverb, you have to be very clear. You can't have that ambiguity, and you have to be very succinct, right? You have to be very short and brief. Otherwise, it's not a proverb. It's like a paragraph. And so, if you say ichi wa o, right, like one bird, if you say a bird, you're going to interpret it as a bird, even if you mean rabbit. And so it doesn't, the message doesn't get across.
I mean, does it not? It's the same message.
No, it does get across, but for some reason they really want a rabbit in this proverb, whoever came up with it. So
is that why they also have the o mo? Because usually mo would replace the o.
I guess so. Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah. Well, because maybe the moeza would sound kind of ambiguous, like a different.
Well, I would just say ito moezu, but I guess ito o moezu. Yeah. I guess they wanted to keep the
probably
not
like
exactly a rhyme, but the nito o and ito o, like
true. Yeah. So that's a good proverb to know, and it's just an interesting little quirk of the usagi kanji. But basically, the conclusion here is that your average Japanese person is going to say hiki or piki most of the time, but every once in a while you might run into a person like me or Ryan will go, well, actually, there's a fun little quirk about rabbits.
And that's why you should use usa.
Yeah, usa, yeah. So
preserve the specialness of rabbits.
So yeah. One last thing that I stumbled across while doing the research for this involves butterflies. And as we said, there's tons of counters for animals, and there's tons of exceptions for things in general. And one thing I learned was that, again, just like with rabbits, there's this quote unquote correct way to count butterflies, even though most people use hiki, piki, I think, for butterflies. But this correct way that you would maybe see on a quiz show is to. And this is the long to, which normally you would use to count big animals.
I just got it. It's because of Mothra. Someone was watching Mothra and was like, no, that's too big for Hiki. we have to
Yeah,
use
that's
to.
not a hiki. That's a to. That's a to.
Speaking of which, what is the counter for kaiju?
Oh man, I'm sure somebody on Yahoo Answers has asked that in Japanese. I will look into that. Anyway, so so
Yeah,
yes,
to
you
is
can
big
use
animal.
to is big animal. So again, like a cow, what else? A horse, maybe. I've seen sheep, maybe. One article I was reading was saying that even among dogs, like once you get to about a golden retriever size, you're going to start to see people use to describe it. But that is kind of a gray line. Some people might still use hiki. Some people might use to. Maybe if you have a super fat chihuahua, maybe they'll use to. I don't know.
So I kind of want to ask you this because I actually don't know. Is gorilla to?
I do not know.
Because again, I'm not
a
a native Japanese speaker by any means, but like my feeling is that to is big four-legged animal, which a gorilla is not.
Yeah, that is a very good question. I don't know, and I feel like I've looked into that before, but because we don't talk about gorillas much, just kind of one of those things that escapes you.
Yeah, that's the other thing is a lot of these. You have to be specifically counting the animal, which even for like dog, you rarely do. Because if you ask someone, they'll just say like, I have a dog.
Yeah.
They don't,
or something like that.
Yeah. It's, I mean, if they have many dogs, they might use the counter, but it doesn't come up that often. And that's for like a very common animal. So for rabbits and butterflies, especially butterflies, I feel like you would just use a phrase like many more often than you would actually say like there's 37.
Yeah, exactly. And again, most people would use hiki to describe a butterfly, but again, you can use to, head, which is written using the kanji for head. And so one explanation for this, and I don't believe it fully. Maybe there's something to it, but I don't believe it. One explanation is that it is based the counter for to, the counter for head is based on the English term, like for example, head of cattle, like how we say a head of cattle. And really, I only use the term head with cattle, but when I was looking into it, I've also seen it used for sheep, but I think that's fairly rare.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah. So, and this, I was looking into the origins of head of cattle in English, and it said that usually you would not use head of cattle for one cow because it's just easier to use cow. But I argue that cow is just easier. You say 500 cows instead of head of 500 cattle. Like, come on.
Yeah, I
cow
agree.
Is easier.
Yeah, people try to like point out how it exists in English too, like ears of corn. Like no one says that. You just say I bought 3 corns.
3 cards. I love that. Anyway, so the explanation is that it's somehow the to is based on that because I guess when the Meiji period came around, they started basing their words on like Western zoology, and then butterflies were at zoos or being classified by zoologists using these terminology based on the West, and so they ended up being classified as head of butterfly. But I'm not fully convinced because I saw a couple other explanations, and I'm not saying that is what it is for sure. But that is another one of those little interesting quirks that you can tell your Japanese friends. Well, actually, butterflies are to, and then you can be the obnoxious person. All right, then. So I think then we can say goodbye for now, and we'll be back next time, maybe with something more focused on counters. So
or something more bizarre. Find another internet cursing thing or something.
Or some internet cursing thing that leads to strange counters or something.
Or ridiculously in-depth history of some industry no one's ever heard of.
But that's what people want on this show. So, hey, we got to give the people what they want.
Next week, the fascinating history of fundoshi.
Oh, man. I'm sure there is some interesting history there.
I mean, there definitely is, but...
Yeah.
I was going to say who would ask it, but who would ask this question? To be fair, I have literally asked this question today, like to Japanese people. I feel you have to have a pretty high level of familiarity to even wonder this thing, but there have been people who have asked this question.
Definitely.
Unlike the, like, what was the Nantoka Koku Mairi?
Oh, Ushi no Koku Mairi.
Ushi no Koku Mairi, yeah.
Yeah. What's so scary about the hour of the ox? Yeah. All right, man. All right. Well, we're done. Thank you. See you next time.
Yeah, see you all next time.
Hey guys, so just a couple quick things here that I thought of as I was editing this episode, and we didn't make it explicit in the conversation, so I wanted to add it here at the end. First of all, it's definitely possible that the kanji for wa, the counter for birds and rabbits, right, is ateji. And what ateji is kanji that's kind of assigned to a Japanese word after the fact. So there's plenty examples of this. For example, there is actually kanji for the word for coffee in Japanese, even though nowadays it's pretty much always written in katakana, kohi, but there actually is kanji, and that was assigned after the fact. A lot of times, I think typically what happens in these cases is that they try to find kanji that sounds like the word they're trying to assign the kanji to. So maybe somewhere in Japan, a group of people were counting rabbits with wa, but they didn't intend it to be the same counter as birds. But then once that got kind of assimilated into the standard dialect, then somebody decided to assign the kanji for bird to wa because it can be read that way. No idea. I'm just speculating here, but that is definitely possible that the original wa did not mean bird or feather or wing at all, and it just happened to sound exactly the same, so then they just decided to lump them in together with the same kanji. One other thing regarding Buddhism in Japan. Now, Buddhism was and continues to be influential in Japan. Buddhism certainly played an important role in shaping ideas about meat consumption in Japan. But I did want to say that my take on reincarnation was grossly oversimplified. I said something like, reincarnation was a factor. For example, your grandpa dies and comes back as a pig or a cow or something. And of course, you don't want to eat the pig or cow because he used to be your grandpa, right? Reincarnation is, for the most part, not that simple. And of course, it can vary quite a bit depending on which branch of Buddhism you're talking about, right? Not all of them have the exact same view on how reincarnation works. But the point was that Buddhism and certainly reincarnation to some extent was an influential factor in shaping the way people thought about killing animals and consuming their flesh. All right. So again, grossly oversimplified. There's so much more I could say about reincarnation, but hey, that's a whole other topic. And I just wanted to make it perfectly clear that yes, I'm aware. I said something that's not necessarily accurate across the board. Sorry, we do our best here, and we try to present information in a entertaining and succinct way. And sometimes, we oversimplify things a bit. But anyway, again, thank you for listening. See you next time.